Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we have a paid how to play video for Factory 42. Now, Factory 42, what you're going to see here is the production copy of Factory 42. It's been out for a little while now, but there is a new crowdfunding campaign getting ready to go up for the expansion, and you'll of course be able to obtain a copy of the base game as well during that crowdfunding campaign. So be sure to check the description for all of the pertinent information about when and where you can back this game. And without anything else, let's get right into how to play Factory 42. In Factory 42, players will acquire victory points by fulfilling orders. Players, however, will be penalized when government orders go unfulfilled. At the end of the game, additional victory points are awarded for rosettes, inventions, and for being the best in several categories. The player with the most victory points will win the game. To begin the setup, first place the game board out. This side of the game board is for the standard game. You can see it has the red stars with that sort of tan background, whereas this is the side of the board for the commissions expansion. You can see the stars are different, with the star being tan with a red background. Give each player a player board. Again, on the correct side, you can see you have that same setup with the stars, depending on which side you're on. Place the operations tokens nearby. Place the resource cubes on their relevant space of the supply board. You can see we've got materials, metals, food, and special. Within the materials, metals, and food, there are three different sizes of cube. These smaller cubes here, the medium ones, and then these larger ones. And then the two specials are the same size, roughly the size of the medium cubes. It should be noted that the supply of resources is limited by the components in the game. If you requisition or gain a resource and there are none left in the supply, then you do not get that resource. The exception is the rail cars, which you do not have a limited supply of them. So if you run out, just find a suitable substitute, such as a small box or a business card. And by the way, this is a component upgrade that I received as well. The bureaucracy tower should be placed near the bureaucracy section of the game board. This tower, by design, will hold some resources back behind the red tape of your bureaucracy. It will never be intentionally empty during the game. The tray of the tower is the common pool. The resources that end up here can be transported via rail to individual players or may be used for steam production. At the start of the game, during setup, the tower will begin with some resources inside. We'll need to collect 2 of each resource, including the special resources, and then drop them all in as a group. As you can see, many will make it all the way through, though some will be stuck inside. Any that make it through are placed back into the supply. The 2 docks and the warehouse on your player board hold your personal supply of resources. The docks receive resources by rail car. The warehouse starts empty and has a limited capacity. If you ever receive a resource and you do not have the capacity to store it, it instead goes to the common pool. You cannot place it in a rail car, and you cannot swap it for a resource already in your warehouse. This red personal supply symbol, which appears on some cards, indicates payment, and the resource noted as a negative quantity should be returned to the supply. In this case, a rosette and mushroom. This is the spiking bag. It will begin the game with a few resources in it. This includes 1 marble, 1 gold, 1 beer, 1 magic, and then 2 of each other resource. Place the spiking bag near the game board. Keep the rail cars near the game board to form the station. Each rail car starts empty and can hold up to 6 resources. When a rail car is returned to the station, if it has any resources in it, they stay with it for when it is next returned to the board. Place the steam marker on the 0 space of the steam track. Each player chooses a color and takes the corresponding workers and scoring marker. The number of workers will be different depending on the player count. So in a 2 to 3 player game, you'll have 7 workers as you see here. And in a 4 to 5 player game, each player will get 6 workers. Shuffle the government order deck and the market deck and place them near the game board. Shuffle the event deck and then deal 5 into the event space. If you're playing with the commission's expansion, you also shuffle the Elven commissions and the invention decks and place them near the board. Each player places their workers near their personal player board and then places their scoring marker on the 0 space of the score track. Finally, give the starting player token to the player who most recently used a hammer, or randomly determine who will go first. And that's the setup. Each government order item can be manufactured at 3 levels of quality: minimum, standard, and optimum. This table will show you the resource cost to manufacture the item at each quality level. It also shows the rosettes, if any, that are awarded to you for manufacturing at that level. At the bottom here, it shows you the steam required for manufacture. This requirement will be the same regardless of the quality level. These resources at the top show what the government will contribute to aid in the manufacturing process, and these are added to the common pool and are available to use for any purpose. It's important to realize that each government order may be manufactured any number of times by any number of players. The market card shows what value resources are worth when traded to the market with this column and from the market with this column. A dash in the to market column means the market will not take that resource this round, while a dash in the from market column means the market does not have the resource available. So this market will not be taking magic and it cannot provide coal. Event cards act as a timer. For each round, the topmost card is drawn, read aloud, and the effects applied, if applicable. Some events just change the player's personal supplies, and some change the effects of certain locations for that round. All events influence the common pool in a minor fashion by adding or removing resources from it. The 6th and final round always has the same event, which is printed directly on the game board. Inventions are only used for the commission's expansion. Each invention must be researched before it can be used. The cost to research is shown at the bottom ledger of the card. When you acquire an invention, it is kept face down on the left side of your player board until it is researched. Once the cost has been paid, the invention has been researched and is turned face up and then moved to the right side of your player board. It's now ready to be used. Some inventions have a limited number of uses, as indicated by the yellow wax seal. You can use these tokens to indicate how many uses remain. During the operate step, a player may choose to operate any or all of their face-up inventions, removing 1 token when doing so. The text box in the middle of the card describes the effect when activated by a worker in operate. The Elven commission cards are also only used in the commission's expansion. Players acquire commission cards by visiting the Elven embassy to discover what the elves want. These items are manufactured much like the government orders, except there aren't different levels of quality. There's a limit on how many of each item can be made, and only the player holding the card can manufacture the item. Each commission card is kept secret until the player is ready to manufacture the item for the first time. Then it is turned face up, and these tokens are added based on the wax seal. Each time you manufacture this item, remove 1 token from the card. When the final token is removed, then the player will discard it to their own discard pile. A few important distinctions we should cover before we get into the gameplay of Factory 42. This symbol indicates a worker, and this symbol a commissar. A worker is any meeple that's been placed on one of these square-shaped worker slots, while a commissar has been placed here. The same meeple can never be both a commissar and a worker. These terms are mutually exclusive. I briefly mentioned the different cube sizes earlier. These are significant and roughly describe their relative value. Also, as a reminder, if any resource, including rosettes, ever run out, no more are forthcoming unless the existing supplies are released back to the supply through certain game actions. Some slots are marked with magic. Anytime you see this, it means that the worker or commissar placed on that slot will act as if its player added a magic cube for that action. Finally, it should be noted that magic can be used as any resource cube or as one steam at any time. Factory 42 is played over a series of 6 rounds as tracked by the event deck, though it is possible it can end earlier if a player reaches the top of the score track. Each round has 4 phases: draw cards, place workers, resolve locations, and clean up. To begin Phase 1, first draw new government orders and place them face up beside the board. These are the items you'll be trying to manufacture this round. In the first round, draw as many orders as there are players, so let's say there were 2 players. On subsequent rounds, draw as many as are needed to replace the orders manufactured in the previous round. Immediately take the resources shown under government allocation on the new cards only. So both of these are new, so you'll take those resources and add them to the common pool. It's important to realize that if any cards were left over from the previous round, you would not take the resources again. You only take the resources from new cards. If you're playing with the Commission's expansion, you'll draw 3 new inventions from the deck. These will replace any inventions left over from the previous round. Draw a market card from the market deck and place it on the market location of the game board. This replaces the previous round's card. Next, discard the previous event from the previous round and flip the top card of the event deck. Apply the effects of that round's event as shown on the card. In this case, the overseer with the least victory points will receive 2 rosettes. Remember that if there are no event cards to draw, then this is the last round, then you'll use the event printed directly on the board. If the event effect is to gain something, it means all indicated players add the resources shown to their warehouse. Remember, if the player's warehouse is full, then the resources are sent to the common pool. If a location is closed, as you see here, accounting is closed, then that means no workers or commissars can be placed there this round. Phase 2 is the place workers phase. Beginning with the starting player and going clockwise, each player places one of their workers in an open worker or commissar space. This can be in a location on the game board or their player board. When placing a worker, the spaces must be filled in order starting with space 1. However, commissars may be placed at any time, even if there are no workers currently at that location. After every player has placed a worker, each player then places again. Continue around the table until all players have placed all of their workers. Phase 3 is to resolve the locations. Now, normally, of course, you'd have workers placed out all over this board as well as the player boards, but for these examples, I'll be placing them as we explain each location. After all the players have placed their workers, resolve each location in turn according to its location number as shown on the board. If a commissar is at the location, ensure any effects are applied or bribes paid when completing actions for workers. It's important to note that you should leave your workers and commissars on their spaces as you resolve them, as they may be counted by other effects later on. All meeples will be returned at the end of the round. Location 1 is requisition. Each worker and commissar in requisition gets an allotment of resource points to spend on resource requisitions for their warehouse and to add to the common pool. The worker in the first position will also get a rosette, as you can see there. All resources are requisitioned from the supply, and remember, resources are limited. The commissar in requisition will act last and receives 2 points plus 2 points for every worker present to spend on resources to add to the common pool, and 1 point per worker present to spend on resources for their warehouse. Different resources require different amounts of resource points as indicated by the cube size. The exception being coal, which costs 4. Other than that, though, small cubes cost 1, medium cubes 2, and large cubes 3. Magic cannot be requisitioned. You do not have to use all the points you receive to fill your warehouse, but any unused points must be spent on resources, which are then added to the common pool instead. Number 2 is the bureaucracy area. There are no spaces here for workers, as you can see. Instead, the starting player takes all of the resource cubes in the common pool and drops them into the tower. The cubes that fall out become the new common pool. Number 3 is loading. Workers first choose any rail car that is in the station and place it on a loading space. The worker must then load 1 to 4 resource cubes from the common pool, or if a commissar was present, it would be 2 to 5 resource cubes from the common pool to that rail car, and then send it down the track to the last available space. If there were no resource cubes in the common pool when it is your turn to load, then you cannot load any resource cubes. If there's a commissar here, then each worker must add 1 additional cube to the rail car, as we previously mentioned, but also the commissar gains 1 rosette. Number 4 is spiking. Workers can spike railcar shipments with additional resources provided there's room left in the railcar. Remember, each railcar can have a maximum of 6 resources. In order to spike, first check to see if there's a commissar here. If there is a commissar, they select any combination of 4 cubes from the supply, with the exception of magic. They cannot use magic, and then add those 4 cubes to the spiking bag. Then the first worker draws a number of cubes from the bag based on the number of workers at this location. They'll draw 3 resources plus 1 additional per worker. So in this case, 4 resources. Each worker in turn may then place up to 2 of the drawn spiking resources into rail cars that have space for them. So maybe these 2 gold. When doing this, the resources may be placed in the same or different rail cars. The last worker then returns any leftover spiking resources back to the spiking bag and adds 1 flax and 1 lichen to the bag from the supply. Number 5 is shipping. At the beginning of every shipping action, you must move all rail cars down the track so that there are no spaces without changing their order. Then choose 1 rail car in either space 1 or 2 and send it to any open dock on any player's board. If there are no rail cars on the track, then no shipping action can take place. If there is a commissar here, the commissar may choose a worker who must send both rail cars in spaces 1 and 2 to any open dock. This selection must be done when that worker's turn comes up and before that worker chooses a rail car. The worker then chooses the destination docks as normal. Number 6 is steam generation. The gauge here tracks the steam power available. Whenever the gauge goes to 15, a rupture occurs, at which point the pressure immediately drops to 8. At that point, any steam in excess of 8 is simply lost as repairs take the rest of the round to complete. Any resources burned during steam generation, whether they come from the common pool or from a warehouse, will go back to the supply. Steam generation is resolved in 2 steps. First, any burnable resource in the common pool is converted to steam. And then any workers here may burn any number of burnable resources from their warehouse. Workers who convert at least 1 resource to gain steam gain a rosette based on the space they are in. The worker in the first space gains 1 rosette, the worker in the second space 2, and the worker in the third space gains 3. Rosettes will be awarded to workers even if a rupture has occurred. Several different resources can be used to generate steam. Coal generates 3 steam per cube, wood and mushrooms 2 steam per cube, and flax and lichen 1 steam per cube. Playing with the commissions expansion, number 7 is operate, and it's found on your player board. If you place a worker on the operate location of your player board, you can operate as many of your research inventions as you like. Remember to remove one of these tokens if it's a limited use invention, and when the final token is removed, discard the invention. When playing with the commission expansion, number 8 is the Inventors Guild, and this is back on the main board. A worker here may pay Steam to take one of the face-up invention cards. Purchase cost of an invention depends on the space the worker is in. 1 Steam for the first space, 2 for the second, and 3 for the third. Once the Steam is paid, place the invention face down to the left of the player board. These are unresearched plans for the invention. Once the research cost found at the bottom of the card is paid, then you place it face up to the right of your player board. However, this cannot be done until the research step of this round, or a later round, of course. A commissar at this location receives 1 magic from the supply for each worker in the Inventors Guild. The Elven Embassy is number 9 when using the Commissions expansion. This location has a door fee of 1 rosette. Each worker and commissar must pay that in order to use this location. Each worker gets to draw 2 commission cards and choose 1 to keep. The other one is discarded. The chosen card is kept secret face down until the item is manufactured. A commissar receives 1 magic from the supply for each worker in this location who also paid the door fee. There are no other locations that are specific to the commission expansion, and so now we'll go back to the normal side of the board. Number 7 is trading. Workers here can exchange resources from their warehouse with the supply at the rates shown on the market card, as we've discussed. A commissar here imposes a door fee of 1 rosette on each worker that wants to trade. Workers who do not pay the fee to the commissar's player cannot trade at the market this round. The commissar does not get to trade. When performing a trade at the market, you first trade in any resources you want in any combination from your warehouse. This column indicates how much the resources you return to supply are worth. You then use this worth to receive from the supply at the rate shown in the second column the resources that you want to get. You cannot buy resources from the market that you sold to the market in that trade. Any worth that you cannot spend will be lost. All purchased resources must be sent directly to your warehouse, so make sure you have enough space to receive them. Number 8 is research. A worker here may do one of 2 actions. They may spend the resources required by the chosen standard improvement, seen here, and place the relevant chit on the designated space on the player board to show that it's been researched. This could be a small expansion of the warehouse, a large expansion of the warehouse, a crane, or an incinerator. Alternatively, the worker may spend the resources required by one of their face-down invention cards, turn the card face up, and place it on the right side of the player board. The player will then score the victory points shown on the card, and this invention may be used in the future at the operate location. A commissar here is the research and development director and may spend 2 rosettes once to gain 1 magic or 1 victory point. Besides trading their favors, the commissar also provides you with 1 magic for this research. This magic reduces the cost of any research being done by 1 resource or 1 steam. It's important to note that improvements can be researched in any order, but a worker can only research 1 invention or 1 improvement each round. Any resources used to pay the cost are returned to the supply, and any steam is paid by reducing the level of steam in the steam generator, or your incinerator, of course, if you have one. If there is not enough steam available, then you cannot complete the action. Detail of each standard improvement and what they can do can be found on page 11 and 12 of the rulebook. Number 9 is Manufacturium 1. Each Manufacturium that has a worker in the first space can produce 1 finished good from a government order or one of your elven commissions, using resources from your warehouse and one of your docks. Manufacturium 1 uses dock 1, Manufacturium 2, dock 2. When doing so, take steam power as needed and generating more steam if you have an incinerator. The commissar in this location provides 1 magic for manufacturing. This magic reduces the cost of any manufacturing being done as usual. Any rosettes earned from the manufacturer of any order, government, or elven, are collected when the order is completed. All other rewards are collected at the end of the round. Each government order can be manufactured more than once and by more than one player. Once manufactured, move the worker from the first manufacturium space to the card on the quality level that was produced. This shows that it has been completed. An order is counted as completed as long as it has at least one worker on it. The first time a player manufactures an elven commission, flip the card face up and add the indicated number of tokens. Each time you manufacture it, including the manufacturer where you flipped it, remove one of those tokens. Once you have used it the last time, discard the commission. Number 10 is accounting. Each worker here may do 2 different actions from the following list. They also may do them in any order. However, they may not repeat an action within any given round. They may bribe the committee, call in a favor, exploit their fame, or cheat. If there's a commissar here, each worker must pay a door fee of 1 resource to the commissar to complete their actions. Any resources received this way must go to the commissar's warehouse or be returned to the supply if their warehouse is full. In the final round of the game, it costs 1 rosette to place a worker in the accounting. This cost is paid to the supply and it must be paid when the worker is placed. Number 11 is Manufacturium 2. And number 12 is end of round scoring. The government awards victory points for completed orders and penalties for incomplete orders at the end of each round. The player whose workers completed the most orders is named the hero of labor and gets 1 rosette. When counting completed orders, only unique orders are counted. The government appreciates variety over quantity. In the case of a tie, each of the tied players gets 1 rosette. A player will get 2 times victory points for each of their completed government orders. It should be noted, though, that performing the same order twice does not provide victory points twice. When there are government orders that have not been completed, each player must lose either 1 times victory points per incomplete order or 2 times rosettes once, regardless of the number of uncompleted orders. This will be resolved in player order. After awards and penalties are given out, check for the end of game conditions. Remember, the game ends after 6 rounds or when a player reaches 42 on the scoring track. If either of these conditions occurs, immediately go to game end, which we'll discuss momentarily. Otherwise, continue with the cleanup. Every incomplete order receives a rosette, and an order may end up with multiple rosettes if it goes uncompleted for more than 1 round. These rosettes are all awarded to the first player that completes the order. Any orders that are completed are removed during the cleanup phase. All meeples are returned to their player. Empty rail cars must be returned to the station. However, a rail car containing resources on a player board may be kept or returned to the station as the player chooses. Rail cars that are kept may be freely moved between the player's docks. And as long as it's not the last round, pass the starting player token to the next clockwise player and then begin a new round. At the end of the game, no matter how the game ends, players will receive the following rewards. 1 victory point for every 3 rosettes they have. Any leftover rosettes are not scored. 1 victory point is awarded to the player with the most resources in their warehouse. 1 victory point is awarded to the player with the most standard improvements. If using the commissions expansion, there are some additional rewards given. 1 victory point for each unresearched invention a player has. 1 victory point to the player with the most elven commission cards. 1 victory point is awarded to the player with the most researched invention cards. And with any of these rewards, if players tie for the most, they will all receive 1 victory point. It also should be noted the scoring track does not limit the final scoring. Players are allowed to score higher than 42. Additionally, for easy reference, the final scoring is printed on the game board in the event location. And if there is a tie for the final score, the player with the most rosettes wins. If there's still a tie, it's a joint victory. Finally, we're going to cover all the rules that are brought in by the brand new expansion, Specialists and Golems. First, there is an advised rule amendment to the Commissar action at the spiking location. The Commissar action now has an additional bonus. When taking the Commissar action, in addition to what's already there, also take one resource from the common pool and put it into your warehouse. The rest of the standard spiking action is unaffected. There will be a location called Patriot Box. When you place a worker there, you may take an operate action and or also take one food from the supply. You'll now be required to close the black market for the rest of the round by flipping the black market tile to the regular operate side. There will be a new meeple called a specialist. I don't have a specialist meeple, and so we'll use this spider as a specialist. Specialists affect the standard rules as follows. A specialist does not begin play available, but can be bought at any time for the cost of one beer. It then replaces a standard worker. Each player can only ever have a maximum of one specialist. Once a player has bought their specialist, it is available for the rest of the game, replacing that standard worker, and the specialist cannot then be converted back to a regular worker. A commissar will not count a specialist as a worker. However, a specialist does count as a worker for all other purposes. A specialist can be placed on any numeric slot no matter how many workers are there. They do not need to follow the normal placement order. A specialist may be placed as if it were a commissar, but does not gain any of the usual commissar benefits of the placement. Another new feature are the golems. I don't have any golems, and so we will use this many to represent a golem. Golems are known within the society as cargadors. A cargador can be created in research for 2 metal and 1 steam. Each player can only ever have a maximum of 1 cargador. The cargador stays on the board once placed and does not get returned to the player at the end of the round, nor does it ever move position unless the player actively does so. For example, when these are returned, it will not then move down to other slots. A cargador cannot be placed in the first slot of any location, nor can it be placed in accounting at all, or in the Inventors Guild. It also must follow normal placement rules, which means that it cannot ever be placed on your own playmat, since it only has 1 slot for workers in each location. Once placed, it may be moved at the cost of 1 steam. Also, since cargadors are simple-minded machines, you may also pay this steam to move an opponent's cargador to any legal spot. This counts as a placement action. If you have the crane improvement, you may move your own cargador without paying the steam cost, but it must still take place during the placement phase and still is an action. A cargador may never be placed as a commissar. Finally, it comes into play as an additional worker and does not replace one the way the specialist does. There's a new location called the calendar clerk. When you place a worker on the calendar clerk, you may take an operate action and must immediately either draw a new event or cancel one currently in play. If you add a new event, you draw a new event randomly from the unused event cards and resolve it immediately as if you were in the event phase. If you cancel an event, you simply ignore the effects of the event currently in play and then discard it at the end of the round as normal. Keep in mind though, any losses or gains of resources caused by the current event are unaffected by the cancellation. And that's everything you need to know to play Factory 42 as well as the brand new expansion, Specialists and Golems. Be sure to check out the crowdfunding campaign for this game. Again, all of the pertinent information is in the description below. And until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.